Hello and welcome to the BTS Presents show. I'm your host, David Stearns, and today we'll be talking with Mike Arenson, also known as Solar Mike, who will tell us about the history of solar in Santa Cruz. And a lot of people don't know that Santa Cruz was one of the early bastions of solar, yet another way that Santa Cruz is leading by example with more solar homes per capita than any other town in the state of California. It's known worldwide for its natural beauty, but many don't know that it's also known for its commitment to protecting that natural beauty. Solar was not nearly as ubiquitous in Santa Cruz as it is today. While solar has exploded in recent years, the technology was largely forgotten for 2 decades in the 1980s and 90s. Thankfully, however, our guests kept solar in the collective consciousness in Santa Cruz since the 1970s, when Jimmy Carter had a solar hot water system installed on the roof of the White House, and the oil embargo had the world tuned to alternative energy.
Well, to answer your last question, first, I would approach it the same way I approached it when I was in the White House.
June 1979.
And this dependence on foreign sources of oil is of great concern to all of us. In the year 2000, the solar water heater behind me, which is being dedicated today, will still be here, supplying cheap, efficient energy.
I'd like to welcome Mike to the show. Thank you, Mike.
David.
Thank you for being here. Mike's going to tell us a little bit about what happened in those lost decades. Tell us what has transpired in Santa Cruz and how we have come to be known as a leader in solar.
Thanks, David. What I'd like to talk about is what I'm calling the modern solar age, which is roughly from the 1970s forward. And in particular, I'm going to show a few slides and talk about from the 1970s and 1980s. A lot was happening in solar energy in the world really over thousands of years, how we've used agriculture, the way that people traditionally built homes to take into account the natural systems of the earth and the sky where they lived. But the modern age is really started in the 1970s. And I came to Santa Cruz in 1975. In 1976, I got involved with solar energy. Right away, I saw that people were interested in like the way they could get their hands on things that they could build to do simple things like trying to heat their home using the sun's energy, heat their water, use daylighting in buildings that often were just so enclosed they didn't have any sunlight coming in for any kind of lighting. And then some of the more interesting or esoteric things at that time, which would be using solar energy for running a food dryer or for cooking.
John Arenson of Woodward, Iowa, is a pioneer when it comes to harvesting energy from the elements. In his 40 years on the farm, he's never had an electric bill. His power company is Mother Nature. He has added solar collectors to help keep him warm while he works. The day may be sunny or cloudy and windy. Either way, the elements are working for John Arenson. In northeastern Nebraska, 50 farms were selected to test low-cost on-farm energy systems. With the help of others in the project, Webben built this solar heat collector on the roof. Water heated up here is drained into an insulated tank below. It's then piped to meet the various needs of his milking operation. He also built a solar food dryer, which Mrs. Webben uses for drying fruits and vegetables. Attached to the house is a solar collector wall that Webben built for $600. It delivers heat inside the house in the winter and substantially lowers fuel costs. Earl Fish of Belton built a wraparound solar collector to dry his grain. Fanned inside the cylindrical building, the warmed air dries 6,500 bushels of corn every fall with no additional heat source. Fish added the solar unit at a cost of $485. Since then, he has also added this solar house to his home.
Solar. The reason I use solar energy is because it heats my home. Yeah, I dry my grain with it. We're not going to run out of it. With energy costs going skyward, why, it's the route for me to go.
Like a growing number of concerned citizens, these farmers are exploring practical ways to make their operations more energy
We've had in
self-sufficient.
Santa Cruz First of all, an architectural firm. They're still here and active, Thatcher and Thompson. So I want to acknowledge them first of all. They came out with solar home designs in Santa Cruz in the 1970s, and then they published a book that had national distribution on how to design a home using the sun naturally. And that book's probably out of print, but you can find it at most libraries in the U.S. because that book had really good circulation. And those homes are still in operation, like over on National Street in the city of Santa Cruz. Those houses get most of their energy for space heating from the sun.
I grew up around the corner from the Thatchers. Do you know if their
I don't
house
know. I don't know if their house in particular has. They've incorporated energy efficiency design, and solar into many of their buildings. The next thing I want to mention is the Santa Cruz Alternative Energy Co-op, and that's how I got started in solar. Is I was a student at the university, and the founder of the co-op, Brian Williams, came into the class where I was a student, and he said, "We're looking for someone to help edit our newsletter, and it's about solar energy." And I go, "Solar energy? Wow, that sounds really cool." And so immediately I got an internship with them, writing articles about what was happening in Santa Cruz with solar. And there were several solar companies here, including LeBlue Enterprises, Santa Cruz Solar, and the old bagelry on Cedar Street is actually where a company called Solar Access was. And you could go in there and you could buy solar hot water panels, and you could learn about solar design for your home. And so through the co-op, I started both educating myself about solar energy and then reaching out to the community through all kinds of public events that were happening in Santa Cruz in those days. And so we would do events such as Earth Day, or we would create events like Sunday, which were just focused on solar. We toured the schools and would do presentations to the students about ways to use solar energy. So all of this was going on in the 70s then and into the 80s.
Some people have a deep, abiding respect for the natural beauty that was once this country. And some people don't. People start pollution. People can start.
In addition to work that individual companies were doing, like Thatcher and Thompson or Solar Access, and then the Energy Co-op, there was Cabrillo College. And Cabrillo had the largest solar training program in the country. The effect of that we still feel today. People who went through that program ended up going into the solar energy industry. They went to work for PG&E. They started their own business, like Sharon Block of Block Energy Design would be an example. Or John Berkey, who went on to be very involved in international wind development. So I've run into so many people who were part of that program and ended up having some kind of careers working in the solar or energy field. So we couldn't say enough about what was happening at Cabrillo then, and one of the main instructors there was Bob Staten. The program director was Dave Burton, and Dave Woodworth ran the Solar Energy Lab. And I mention these guys because they really are an essential part of the history of what was happening with solar energy in
Santa Cruz was ranking pretty high. Cabrillo was one of the
Cabrillo,
preeminent,
it was the
preeminent program.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I mean, Santa Cruz was a nexus of social change. And solar energy was something that people saw that they could get their hands on in a way and do something with and do it right away, and they could do it cheap. And that was my focus at that time also. What can you build by going out to the dump and bringing it home and turning it into a solar hot air panel to be able to heat your house? Or build a solar water heater out of an old hot water tank. And so we used reclaimed materials and taught people through hands-on workshops how they could do it themselves for low cost or no cost.
And it really was kind of in line and a part of the social movements that were happening. What drives people today is the cost of electricity and saving money, whereas that was more about the conscious decision, or was it a combination?
Yeah, well, everybody wants to save money, and solar energy would help them save money. But it wasn't driven by corporations. Maybe it was in part driven by people's kind of anti-corporate attitudes that we've had here. But it wasn't, the corporations weren't taking the lead on it. It really was coming from the people. I want to mention a couple of other things that were going on then as we lead into the 80s and the 90s.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay,
that sounds great.
The city of Santa Cruz could tell that something was in the air about energy, and they formed an energy advisory committee. So both the city and the county of Santa Cruz started having public bodies that wanted to have some say about what the city and county was going to do around energy. And so a local organization was formed, and they drafted what's called the Energy Future Plan, an Energy Future Plan for Santa Cruz. And they came up with 30 or 60 points of action items to take to make Santa Cruz more energy independent. And I've gone back and I've revisited that plan now over the last 30 years, and we have pretty much checked off almost everything on that plan.
Wow.
So they were visionary. It was a community process where they involved a lot of the public in having some input in what they wanted to see for energy self-sufficiency. Some of the founders of that program, Jane Weed became mayor of Santa Cruz. Len B.A. started an energy retrofits business that works nationally. Bob Staten, leading instructor at Cabrillo College. So these I'm mentioning that you can see how people kind of move forward into other work and careers through their activism around energy. So we have that organization, and then we have the city and the county really showing leadership in trying to do something before others in the state toward energy efficiency, resource conservation, and renewable energy. Now we're going to move a little bit into the solar electric age. And I would just point out that my first solar electric system was made up of solar cells about this big. And I had 6 or so, and I used them to charge some batteries. And the batteries were the size of 2 flashlight batteries. Now that was amazing. I could generate my own electricity from the sun using solar cells that size. And I bought my solar cells from a character, Roger Denault. You might have heard of Roger here in town. Roger started selling solar cells really back in the early 80s. And Roger's gone on to, found a pretty substantial, successful solar business in Santa Cruz that employed a lot of people. So again, here's that progress we have. The other thing that was going on, though, not just my little solar cells, was Fred Keeley. Fred Keeley was our state representative here in Santa Cruz. And Fred, along with a few other people in the state, helped put into place legislation that required the utility to accept electricity back to the grid from a solar power system on a person's home. They called it net metering. So if you wanted to put solar panels on your house to make electricity, there was now a law in place that said the utility had to accept that power. Up until then, the utilities, we don't want that. We're not going to do that. So Fred Keeley was instrumental in making that happen in Santa Cruz.
Every day when the sun rises, tens of thousands of PG&E customers, more than any other utility in the nation, are proving the value of solar. They're saving money on their bills while helping the environment. If you're one of these forward-thinking homes or businesses, please accept our congratulations and thanks. Of course, how solar works for you may be different in some ways than how it works for your solar neighbors. It all has to do with how much electricity your system generates and how much you use on a daily, monthly, and annual basis. Sometimes customers produce more power than they use and send the surplus energy back into the grid. Other times, homes and businesses use more power than their solar panels can generate. So depending on how much energy your system generates and your consumption, you may end up with either a charge or a credit for the month at the normal rate. If you participate in a time of use plan, you can also export electricity to the grid when rates are higher and use electricity when prices are lower during certain periods, like at night. In this case, you may actually get a credit for the month even though you've used more energy than you've exported. The credits you accumulate in a given month can offset the charges you receive in other months. This is called net energy metering, or NEM. To make sure you have the full picture, PG&E sends you and every solar household both your regular monthly PG&E bill that includes a minimum electric service charge, as well as a NEM statement that gives you a monthly and year-to-date snapshot of your charges and credits. But whatever kind of solar household or business you are, there's one more thing to know. Everyone with solar can save money on energy, while they're making a difference for the environment.
As I understand it, the very first solar home that went on the grid, selling their electricity back to the utility, was right here in Santa Cruz County. And it's up the coast. It's the home of Susan and Jonathan Whitwer. And they put in a pretty big solar electric system. And I've been working with and servicing that system for the last several years. It's still working. How many years? After 20 years, the very first solar electric system on the grid in the state is still operating.
Incredible.
So that might not be as much of a nutshell as I'd hope, but that kind of encapsulates the history of solar up until solar electricity taking off in the market here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that history. It's incredible to know that Santa Cruz and people like yourself being on the forefront of that movement. So thank you, Mike, for that.
Thank you, David.
And next, we'll see a little clip that will hopefully inform our viewers about just how solar works. Please enjoy. So you mentioned net metering. Viewers might not know just how important net metering is for solar, but particularly solar today. The utilities are required to not only absorb any excess energy that your system is sending back to the grid, and remember we're talking about solar photovoltaics.
Well, what I see happening with people being able to generate their own electricity and sell it back to the utility, and I didn't ever dream of this or imagine this back in the 70s, is that we actually can power the entire city during the daytime off of energy that comes from the sun. Every single moment that it's sunny out during the day, we can run the city of Santa Cruz, for example, off of the sun. And so it's essential that we keep in place net metering that allows people to sell their power back to the utility. They sell it back to the utility, it goes to the rest of the neighborhood. So we want to live in a solar-powered community, and net metering is an essential part of that.
Great. Thank you for that. Thank you all for watching BTS Present Show. I'm your host, David Stearns, and I've been kind enough to be joined by Mike Arenson, aka Solar Mike, and also want to say thank you to our guests who are on location and all their contributions. Have a good evening.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. It's a beautiful day. I just checked. The sun is just now coming out through the clouds and the fog here in Santa Cruz, which is very appropriate for this picture right here. The sun and all of the renewable energy sources derived from or related to the sun, the winds, which are caused by the sun, the waves, which are caused by the wind, green plants, which grow under the light of the sun, falling waters, which were raised into the sky by the heat of the sun, as well as ocean thermal power, where we can utilize the temperature differences between the sun-warmed surface layers and the cold depths. And then there's lunar tidal power and geothermal earth power. Together, these provide in less than 1 hour enough energy for all of humanity for a whole year. And humanity's energy usage at present is really very wasteful. So hey, if we move towards more smarter, more efficient infrastructure and towards wiser, more community-oriented energy habits, and that's a shout out to the transitions movement, we'll have a much more manageable problem. All of these, especially the big one, the sun, are clean, limitless, homegrown, and democratically distributed. It doesn't get much better than that.
Well, thank you for watching the BTS Presents show, and we're the Mystic Troubadours. This is Robert Seals on guitar, Lolita Karst on percussion and vocals, Thomas Sage on keyboards, and I'm Richard Karst.
Sand castles, a New Brighton beach, natural bridges and the Wales Breach. Monterey Bay, misty dawn, Mount Madonna, she's looking on. The redwood forest of Bonnie Doon, Pajaro Dunes and Dolphin Tunes. The boardwalk of Santa Cruz, Cannery Rose, Steinbeck Blues. Monterey Bay, otters play, butterflies stop along the way. Monterey Bay, long after dark, the tide rolls in and the sea lions bark. Monterey Bay, the tide rolls out, the blue whales blowing a water spout. Monterey Bay, misty dawn, Mount Madonna, she's looking on. The redwood forest of Bonnie Doon, Pajaro Dunes and Dolphin Tunes. The boardwalk of Santa Cruz, Cannery Rose, Steinbeck Blues.
And now a word from our sponsor.
enjoyed this program, you can support community television with a generous contribution. Send your tax-deductible donation to CTV, 816 Pacific Avenue, Santa Cruz, California, 95060. You can also support CTV by giving a donation online at www.communitytv.org. Then press the donate key.
Community Television thanks Hoffman's Bistro for their support. Hoffman's is located at 1102 Pacific Avenue in beautiful downtown Santa Cruz and is open for breakfast, lunch, and dinner 7 days a week starting at 8 a.m. They feature live local jazz bands starting every night at 6:30. Hoffman's Bakery makes everything in-house from Ed Hoffman's famous scones to decadent wedding cakes. For more information, visit hoffmansantacruz.com or phone 420-0135.